Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Jewish American Heritage Month panel. My name is Andrew Honig. I am the Young Dems Chair of DuPage County, and I am also a village trustee here in the village of Lombard. And I just wanted to welcome and thank you all for being here. And I wanted to introduce our panelists and and everyone that is here to speak on the panel. We're gonna start. We have Paul Farber here. We also have Leah, who is a judge here in DuPage County, and we also have Irene Honig, who happens to be related to me, as you see my last name, who's my grandmother. And I wanted to thank you all for being here. And if you guys want to introduce yourself real quick before we go ahead and get started, we can start with you, Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Farber. I'm a precinct committeeman in Downers Grove Township, and I'm on the executive committee for the Downers Grove Township Dems. And I'm active in my synagogue, which is Congregation Etz Chaim in Lombard.
Very nice, Paul. Leah, next.
Yes. Hello, my name is Leah Setson. I'm a circuit court judge in DuPage County. I was recently appointed by the Illinois Supreme Court, and I'll be a candidate in 2024 for retaining the same position. I've actually been a lifelong resident of DuPage County, so I may have some sort of unique insights as to growing up Jewish in DuPage County from the 70s on. And I do belong to a congregation in Naperville as well.
Very nice. Well, thank you. And Irene?
Hi, I'm Irene Honig. I am a retired DuPage County High School teacher for 21 years, and I have lived with my family in DuPage County since 1971. So I think I have a perspective on how it's changed. And I'm a member of Etz Chaim.
Thank you, Irene. So going forward, I will be your co-host, and Ken will be here to jump in at any point that he seems necessary but and fit. But so going forward, I'm going to read off the topics of this panel, and just to keep in mind as I ask 4 questions to the panel, while keeping in mind these topics, to have a mindful and thoughtful discussion about Judaism and in modern day America. And the topics of today's panel are as follows: to have a discussion that we have never had a Jewish president of the United States, and how does this play a role in federal politics and the way America perceives Jewish people. Second topic to keep in mind is the study of the Bible and the history of Judaism, similarities and differences of how modern day temples incorporate liberalism and progressive values through the teachings of religion. And finally, the importance of seders and how families all across the world have used their own unique touch to make it more meaningful. And so we could definitely start with Paul. This is going to be our first question to the panel. And so I would like to start off with, how have the Western suburbs become more inclusive and tolerant in the last 30 years? And what still needs to change here in DuPage County for the better? Paul?
I've been out here in DuPage County since 1977. Not quite as long as Irene, but a while. And when I first moved in, as a story, I was putting up a mezuzah for anyone who's not Jewish. Mezuzah is it's a religious symbol. It has the Shema, a holy prayer, inside on the doorpost. And a group came by from the local Baptist church to welcome. They said, "We see you moved in. We wanted to welcome you and invite you to join our church." And I said, "Well, I'm Jewish, but thank you very much." And they said, "Well, we didn't think they allowed Jews to live in DuPage County." So things have changed a bit over the years, though it's gotten better. But there's still, in my opinion, still some anti-Semitism here in the county. I don't know if anyone else has an alternate or filling in other opinions.
Yeah, Leah?
So I guess we all started in the 70s. I was born in 1975, so I really can't speak to the early 70s. But what I specifically remember, when my parents built their house in a subdivision, and they would come around now I can't think what it's called, Luminaria, with Luminaria, which is what Christians put out for sort of pave Jesus's path for Christmas. And so my parents, who actually were fairly secular, we weren't really observant Jews, but they felt very strongly in their faith about their the religion, perhaps more as a culture, and said, we're not going to do that. And so then what the neighbors did was they kind of pushed it closer on either side. So Jesus would have to jump. But it was definitely an outsider experience. There were very few Jewish students. And when I was going to elementary school in particular, even in my high school, which was fairly big, one of the Naperville high schools, my class had almost 600 people, but I could probably count maybe one or two other Jews in my grade and frankly in the whole school. What I have been able to witness is definitely as the county has become more progressive, it's become much more diverse, and with the diversity and the progressive nature of politics here, I think that it's definitely become more open and accommodating and respectful of other religions. So that is what I've seen in my experience here.
Thank you. Irene?
I do agree with that. When we came in 1971, it was difficult because we were one of the few homes that didn't celebrate Christmas. But what I've seen is with so many different people entering DuPage County, I think that the county itself has become much more accepting of others. And I think that through the schools, through our teaching, the young people are much more accepting in general.
Yeah.
And I think, Irene, that's got a lot to do with folks moving into the county from Cook County specifically.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Mm-hmm.
Definitely, I could see that. So moving on to our second question, if anyone doesn't have anything else to add, I was actually thinking that with this question specifically, when I was younger, I was one of the few Jewish kids in my class, and I could relate. I'm younger, but I could relate to everything you guys have said in the way that things have been progressing forward, and I've been a part of that change. And being amongst younger people, it's definitely a difference. Even when I was younger in middle school, it's definitely changed for the better. But so for the second question, I will pose it back to Paul. How does the mandatory teaching of the Holocaust in 11th grade change people's understanding of the history of the Jewish people? Paul, do you have any insight?
Yeah, I'd like to quote from the philosopher Santana, I think it was Santana, who said, those who forget the lessons of the past are doomed to repeat, the errors of the past are doomed to repeat them. And I think people need to know about the Holocaust. I know there's been a lot of controversy, maybe not in DuPage County, but certainly outside of Illinois, about the teaching of the Holocaust. And this happened. It's something that should not be forgotten. And I think as Jews, we realize that other groups have suffered similar fates. I mean, the Jews weren't the only ones killed in the Holocaust. Hitler tried to wipe out the gypsies. He tried to wipe out the gays. He tried to wipe out a lot of people. But if people don't understand what happened then, and that it could happen again if we're not careful, if we're not watchful, it could happen again.
Leah, any perspective on this?
What I'll say is actually in my kids' school district, they go to the Holocaust Museum in, I believe it's 8th grade. So they actually start a little younger.
Oh, wow.
Learning about it, which I think is really wonderful, because non-Jewish kids don't necessarily have any direct familiarity with the Holocaust. And frankly, even in an educated area, DuPage County is a very highly educated county, I think, overall. But if parents aren't talking to the kids and they hear it on TikTok and those other social media apps, I mean, unfortunately, they think of it as a joke. They actually don't even know necessarily what they're saying. And so I think that repeated education, starting early, definitely does open their eyes to what this really was and the impact it has on people, even if it wasn't their family, their ancestors.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. Irene?
Well, I think one thing that we can learn for one lesson that's very important is how during the Holocaust was the power of speech. The fact that how Hitler was able to really mesmerize the population. And this is something we need to teach kids and in our population to question what people have to say regarding others. And the other thing is this idea of the Holocaust is a perfect example of scapegoating, of blaming somebody else for the problems in the country. And that certainly can be, that certainly is a lesson that we all need to learn. And I think it's very, very good to take kids to the Holocaust Museum and to start younger. I know when I was a kid, they never spoke about the Holocaust. I really knew very little about what it was. So I guess as we get further away, it was easier for people to talk about.
And I guess I knew about it as an early age because I had one cousin. I'm the youngest of the cousins in my family, and we had one cousin she survived Auschwitz.
Uh-huh.
She still had the number tattooed on her wrist. So I mean, it was very real to us.
Right. Well, thank you for your guys' input. And something else, kind of going back to our one of our topics about Seders. Recently me and my grandmother went to a Seder, and we had talked about how they integrate all across the country different unique little caveats that they do to pretty much embrace where they live in their country, and they all have a different way of preparing the Seder, and they have different traditions of the history that when you go through the Seder and the hardship of the Jews in Egypt and all those different things. And maybe another question to ask you guys is that, have you guys experienced like maybe something that has been new or progressive at Seders, if you have attended any of them recently, because I know that we all have a mutual friend, Florence, the Appel, who goes to Eskaim, and we had attended a Seder that was a very cool insight into what others do across the world to remember the hardships the Jews went through and kind of how they prevailed in their way. And so I would like to throw back, maybe we could go back to Leah, if you've experienced any interesting Seders that have enlightened you in a way or taught you something new.
So I am proud, we'll say, I host the Seder for a lot of families in my community, people who really don't have, a lot of people who live here now are somewhat transient in the sense that they moved away from their families, and so they don't really have family to celebrate the major holidays with. And so I have hosted a group of people for probably 15 years. So I haven't necessarily added a lot of new traditions, but what I will say is doing the same thing year over year and watching all the children, the little children, who just enjoy running around when they're little and jumping on my trampoline when they were little when the Seder was over. Now that they're teenagers and older, they appreciate the tradition of it and the routine of it and the reconnecting with the community and with their families doing this ritual. So that's, I think, probably what I enjoy most about the Seder. And in terms of just sort of maybe what's more modern is that each person who comes to the Seder thinks about sort of how they've been a slave in their own life and their personal slavery and their personal path to freedom. So to be able to connect it personally, in addition to us as a people.
Well, thank you. Paul, any recent experiences?
Nothing out of, I would say, the ordinary, but I did want to say, at least for us, for the first night of Passover, the first Seder is a night you spend, you have the Seder, the Passover dinner with your family. The second night has been with community. And the one thing I like at Etz Chaim, we've got the community Seder, and I think this past Seder, we had probably 100 people. So you get a good mix of families and sharing of experiences, and it's good to come together as a community.
Agreed.
Yeah, definitely agree. Thank you again for your input. Irene, do you have any?
Well, I think when I was in Israel, what I was really taken with was the idea of how, with community and how the Jews celebrate the Shabbat every Friday night. And we were at a hotel, and I think this is so nice. Actually, it was families meeting together at Shabbat and being with other people. So it was both the family and the community.
Mhm.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. So the next question, I'll pose it for Paul again, is how have schools and religious institutions learned about Judaism?
How do the schools and religious institutions learn about Judaism?
Yeah, I like the teachings and practices. Yep.
Well, I know for one thing, we invite that at Chaim, we invite schools to send classes to the synagogue for Saturday night, Friday night services. And we have, if you'll forgive the expression, someone who could give them an orientation as to how the service is and what's going to be going on. And that acquaints them with what the Jewish service is all about. And that usually happens. We get a group in about every week, not only from high schools, but Elmhurst College, I know, has sent classes in of comparative religions. I don't know if the high schools, and maybe Irene could fill me in on this, if they have any comparative religion classes, or is that a little too controversial for DuPage County?
Well, especially at this time. No, they didn't, but they did learn about other cultures. They didn't call it comparative religion. It would be, it was global studies. So it was learning about other cultures. I think that sometimes there's a problem in the schools in the fact that I ran into the problem of teaching stereotypes. We had a teacher who insisted on Neil Simon's plays being used as an example of Jewish literature. And it was difficult. I had to explain that this is a stereotype. The New York, the Jewish person who lives in New York is a stereotype and not emblematic of Jewish people.
And the other thing is, many people have the misconception that that Judaism is a race. Judaism isn't a race; it's a religion. Sammy Davis Jr. didn't look Jewish, but he was. Yaphet Kotto, the actor who recently passed away, was Jewish, and he didn't look like a New York Jew. The Falashis, who are the Ethiopian Jews who claim to have descended from Solomon and Sheba, don't look whatever typically Jewish is supposed to look like. But people need to understand that Judaism, just like Catholicism or Protestantism or Buddhism or Hinduism, is a religion. It's not a race.
Well, there's a theory now with all this genealogy going around that it is in fact a race because so many of the Jews came from the same place.
Interesting.
So whether or not, that's to be proven. So I was of the opinion that it wasn't a race as well. And, you know, there are two sides to it now.
But I would not argue with you, but contend that there was a big Jewish community in China. And there was a
Sure.
Jewish community in India.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm agreeing with you, you know, but they thought that like Ashkenazi Jews were more like a race.
Mhm.
Because they, you know, they shared similar, you know, similar traits.
And in
Whatever.
that sense, I mean, I did the Ancestry.com DNA. And it came back 95% Eastern European Jew.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
The other 5% was Asian, which explains my liking of Chinese food. But
There was somebody on the route, the trade route.
well, Ancestry.com included Russia, Eastern Europe, and Russia as they included Russia as Asia. So
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. Okay. Leah, do you have any input on the subject we're on?
Yes, although I think we went into a tangent, so I'm just gonna respond to that
Sorry.
tangent.
Yeah,
and
we
circle
did.
back to the question.
sorry, Your Honor.
Sorry.
It's an interesting topic because actually I think this is key to what a lot of people don't quite understand who are of a religion, is that we are both a religion and a people. Now, does people mean we have a race? I mean, I don't know as that term is defined, but we certainly have a culture. And so we have, unlike other religions, even people who are not religious, even people who might technically be atheists who don't believe in God, still subscribe to being Jewish and are very strongly Jewish. And that is what sets us apart to some extent from other religions, because if you were raised Catholic, but you no longer believe in Catholicism, you don't call yourself a Catholic, just as an example. So, so I think maybe that kind of bridges the positions of Paul and Irene.
That's yes, and they call it. I'm sorry to interrupt. They call themselves culturally Jewish,
right? Because we still have the culture even without the religious aspect. You know, it's an interesting question about how kids learn about Judaism in school, because I think the honest answer is they don't. And thinking back when I was a kid, we had Christmas. People use the word Christmas. We had Christmas shows and that kind of thing. And there was always maybe there was a token Hanukkah song. My mom would come into the classroom and she'd bring in our menorah and she would teach in an elementary school setting a little bit about it. But nowadays, I mean, with my kids in school, they don't even call it they call it a holiday party. They don't call it. So just like they're good and bad in everything, the good is, you know, to take the religion out of the school because it doesn't have a place in school. But then on the flip side is kids don't learn. And if kids don't belong to a church that would encourage them to explore different religions, they aren't really exposed to the religion. And frankly, I don't know that they know much about it other than what they might see on social media. So I would say that they really don't learn about it in school unless it's a subject like a comparative religions class, or unless they are obligated to read a book about the Holocaust by Elie Wiesel or something. They're not learning about the religion itself.
Thank you, Leah. Those are all really, really good points, and I'm definitely learning something new here, which is a good point of a panel.
But you know, I just want to point out that is sort of geographically specific because I grew up in New York City. And in New York City, the public schools have not only Christmas off, but they have Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the Jewish high holidays, our school holidays in the New York area. So it sort of depends.
Yeah.
Right. I was just talking about it here in DuPage.
Oh, yeah. No, you're perfectly correct.
Well, we will move on to our next question. Thank you all for your input. So I wanted to ask, what can Jewish citizens here in DuPage County do to promote understanding and respect for our religion and our customs? It could be, you know, more in general, like your everyday, you know, friends, family, or even within a synagogue, or, you know, just within your political groups, or it doesn't matter where, but I will put it back to Leah.
What was the question was, what can we do as Jews to promote sort of the understanding and respect for the Jewish faith?
Yeah, and customs. Yep.
That's a really good question. What I will say is, like other minority groups, I think that we have sort of the additional responsibility to hold ourselves out as role models when we are in the public eye, to dispute those stereotypes and to educate people to understand, hey, look, this is what Judaism looks like. This is what a Jewish person looks like. That person could be Jewish. That person could be Jewish. We're all sorts of professions. We're all sorts of education levels. We frankly are of different races, and just in that way, educate, number one. I will say particularly, I and another judge who was recently appointed are the first two Jewish women in DuPage County to be appointed judge, which, if you're from New York, you're probably laughing, thinking that's, there's a dime a dozen, but here it's very unusual. And I'm particularly proud of that. I'll, at the same time, I don't want that to define me, but that's something that I wear with pride. And our Rabbi Rudolph is actually going to give the invocation at our installation. It'll be the first time ever that a
Very
rabbi
nice.
does that
Rabbi.
for a
Yeah.
judge. So it's pretty exciting. So I just think those kinds of things, normalizing it to people to see we're a religion like any other religion, where I'm a person just like anyone else. And when my kids go out into the community, they are generally proud to be Jewish. And if they hear someone saying something anti-Semitic or even ignorant, because not everyone does it with malice, they truly, sometimes people just don't know, to correct them, just to say, hey, look, that's not okay. One other thing I will say is I was shocked. I cut my cable cord about a year ago, and I was down visiting my mom in Florida who has cable, and I was shocked to see an ad against anti-Semitism. I just couldn't believe it.
Mhm.
And actually now I've seen it even through the
That's
streaming
right.
service.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's clearly still an issue. It's so much an issue that now there has to be advertisements telling people not to be anti-Semitic. So I feel a special responsibility in this day and age to show people in the community, our community, it's not right. We're regular people too. We deserve respect. Our religion deserves respect just as much as their religion does.
Thank you, Leah.
And the best way to do that is to do what pretty much I would say all of us do, to act morally, to act honestly.
I agree.
Leah,
Irene?
I was going to congratulate Leah. That's wonderful
Thank you.
about being one of the two Jewish female judges in DuPage County. It's a longtime resident, and that's an accomplishment.
Who's the other one, if I might ask?
Well, I don't know if I should, I don't know how she'd feel about saying it, so I'll tell you offline.
Tell me offline.
Okay.
Okay. So does anyone else on the panel have any thing to add about just promoting an understanding of Jewish culture in DuPage County?
I'd just like to invite anyone who's interested to either come to Etz Chaim over in Lombard or Beth Shalom over in Naperville, and come on a Friday night for services, just to find out more about us. We just regular folk.
Yeah.
Well, a small thing that we can do certainly is to bring a friend with, to services. And it's a good way to get people oriented, and being able to explain things. And certainly to have kids bring their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's a really good point too. All right, well, we'll move on to the final question that we have. And this is more of a broad question. I guess they could all be broad because there's a lot of answers for a lot of different questions. But so in today's political climate and today's just how things have, been going and, since in the past few years, how will current conditions in this country influence learning about Judaism going forward? And what are the roadblocks and obstacles that we have to face as Jews to kind of, maneuver this very this very tumultuous time that where people are getting very extreme on certain issues, and as we've seen as in recent times, you know, people are still, there's a very strong presence of anti-Semitic groups that plague our entire nation. And so I wanted to get your guys' perspective on that. We can maybe start with Paul.
I think one of the things we can do is support candidates who have a more progressive view. And I don't mean progressive from the far left democratic sense, but progressive in inclusive acceptance. And the other thing we can do is, I don't want to say fight, but support groups that fight anti-Semitism. I mean, we've got to.
Thank you, Paul. Leah?
That is a really good question, and I wish there were answers because maybe it would have been addressed over the last 2,000 years.
Mhm.
Right.
You know, we have become in the last, what I've seen, I'll say what, 7 years, so polarized as a nation. And with that polarization, it kind of gets subdivided then in terms of groups you hate and groups you don't trust, and the things you can say against the different groups. So I think raising awareness that anti-Semitism, and frankly, you know, to some extent, I don't want to get controversial or super political, but to some people, anti-Israel beliefs can be perceived as anti-Semitic altogether. And so it's really just maybe raising awareness that these things that are said, they hurt the people, you know, just like any group, but in particular, as we're talking about Jews, those are hate words to us. That's hate speech to us. So if you are concerned about that, which I think in a lot of ways we become very sensitive to a lot of different groups and things that are okay to say and things that are not okay to say, which is good. But we also should be mindful that it's not okay to say certain things about the Jewish people, and people do. So educating even the people who are well-intended but don't really perceive that those are hateful things to say.
And I've seen some of that even in the Democratic Party here in DuPage County, where I just saw posting up on Facebook applauding the Palestinians and that Israel should never have existed.
Oh, boy.
So that's where, you know, getting, you know, liberal, political, progressive, it can be a position, but just realizing those positions do offend certain people. And if that's not your intention, you should be aware of that.
Mhm.
Irene?
There again, people have their views of Israel. And certainly, you know, someone may feel differently about Israel, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're anti-Semitic. You know, the political view is separated from what we would consider the religious view. I think a good thing to do is to try to combat these stereotypes that people have of Jewish people, if it's at all possible. And I think that certainly in the schools, I mean, that was my field, certainly with various readings of Jewish philosophers, that sort of thing, that I think that would certainly help.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, Irene. You know, I kind of wanted, you know, I posed the 3, you know, topics, you know, before we started. They're more or less questions that I just integrated into the panel. But I think that something we haven't talked about yet, that is a topic that I think is, you know, somewhat of importance. You know, it's important, other people may not, but the fact that we haven't had, you know, obviously there's only been so many presidents of the United States, but, you know, the fact that we haven't had a Jewish president that, you know, has come out and been like, you know, in today's culture, you know, we see, you know, we are very much founded on Christianity of our country. And so we've had, you know, predominantly Christian presidents. And so I wanted to get your guys' input on, do you think that, you know, the teachings of Judaism and the history and the past of the Jews, you know, dating back 2,000 years ago, has played a role in the fact that we haven't had a Jewish president? Or do you think it has to do more with institutionalized norms that have propelled people of the non-Jewish faith and culture to be more put to the forefront? I know it's a difficult question. I just kind of put that together in my head, but I think it's important. So if anyone
We
has
almost had a Jewish vice president,
Yeah, Lieberman,
Joe
Yeah.
Lieberman. He ran with
right,
Al Gore, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you know, it's attractive to say, I wish we had that a Jew could become president, but my fear is, and maybe I'm overly paranoid, that this would just spark the conspiracy people saying Jews are trying to take over.
Yeah. Leah, any input?
Well, I think that if we are asking ourselves, why hasn't there been a Jewish president, that goes along with all other, you know, except for Obama, they've all been white males. They've all been, in fact, they've all been white Christian males. So we do have a lot of different sort of minorities who are asking themselves the same thing. And I think there's just, you know, it's of the ages, but there's sort of a fundamental distrust that some people have just of Judaism or someone who is Jewish. And it's a very high barrier to overcome. And I wish I had the answer to it. I just think as we all understand each other more and see that we're the same, over time, that will change. Over time, we may have a Jewish president or a woman president or a Muslim president or an Indian president, or, you know, any age or group that's non-white male Christian.
Thank you. Irene, anything to add?
Well, I didn't think that in my lifetime, there would be an African-American president, and there was.
Mhm.
So, you know, I really didn't. So, you know, there may very well be a Jewish president or a woman president. I think that keeping in mind, we really need to educate people to, you know, and I think that this younger generation is very savvy to understanding differences in people and being accepting of them. I think it's the older generation, it's our generation that is not.
Mhm.
So I have a hope for the future.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we do have a few more minutes, so another pop-up question in my head. It's not going to be as hard. So, you know, I was thinking about young people, young activists, people getting really involved on this day and age of politics, myself included. I was going to pose the question of how do you, with your all lived experiences, do you all see a change in people in the younger generations that want to learn more about Judaism? And do you see that how social media has affected, you know, the knowledge that from a simple pulling up Google, you could find out really anything, and you could, you know, it's not just by word of mouth anymore. It's you have an answer almost instantaneously. And how does that affect, you know, young people going forward and, you know, raising children? So I know that's a multifaceted question, but if anyone has any, I know you all, you know, in one way or another have kids or have raised kids, but Paul, do you have any?
Boy, that's a tough one. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that one.
Leah?
What I will say is, in my experience of what I've seen with as my children have developed friendships, and frankly, even me with their parents or out in the larger community, I think that we all have, and I'm just trying to think of the best way to say it. A lot of people have developed a desire to respect differences among people. and support that. And so for example, we keep sort of a form of kosher in my house, and my kids' friends know what they can't eat, or if they come over and the mom might call and say, is it okay if, you know, your daughter has this, which I so appreciate the effort. And I think that is only going to grow and increase as this generation then becomes parents and acts like that for their children. So I do think that that is spreading in a very positive way.
I agree.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, Irene, what was your thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I see a much more welcoming sense among younger people to various type other groups, and less isolating of themselves. Certainly there's there's an acceptance of lots of different differences, whether it's religious or gender or and the fact that we are one big community. And I think that many younger people feel that way.
Yeah.
And
Thank
it's
you.
important to give them the freedom to feel that way and to find out more for themselves.
Right.
Good point.
The other thing I was going to say is yes, there are so many different sources that people can learn from. But the other thing is to teach people how to discern what are valuable and truthful sources, because so many times they're getting so much information from Wikipedia and places that aren't really vetted. So there's that problem that we have to face.
Thank you. We do have a question I saw in the messages section from Philip. He said, historically, DuPage County residents, who would you celebrate or would want others to know about? So I think he was meaning other cultures, like how, like I think as a people, like what other cultures like would we, you know, want to include and also get to know. I believe that is his question. I could be wrong, so Philip has if that was a different meaning, he could let us know. But
well, I think certainly and I want to say general the Asian community in DuPage County, and Lucy Chang Evans and I were talking about this the other day, that the largest Taiwanese community in the state of Illinois, if not in the United States, is in DuPage County. And it's mostly in the Westmont area.
I did not know that.
It looks like the question was clarified as to important Jewish residents, just for the next people to answer.
Well, certainly Leah and Andrew.
Right. We did have a Jewish mayor in Elmhurst, Abner Gannett.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Abner was also involved in charge of the rebuilding of Navy Pier.
That I didn't know. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Well, certainly we've had there have been influential Jews in each community. So I'm sure there are a lot. I can't think of sort of, this is the one Jew you should really know about in sort of recent history in DuPage County. I don't know if anyone else has someone.
Not offhand.
No.
Just trying to think of someone.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, Philip. Well, we are approaching the time, and I wanted to thank you all for being on the panel. Irene, Leah, and Paul, you guys have been amazing. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules. And if anyone has anything else they would like to kind of say here ending the panel, I'd be open to hearing it.
Well, I'll just say thank you for having me. Thank you to whoever watches this. It's an important topic that I feel like goes a little bit under the radar because there are a lot of other there's a lot of other prejudice, certainly, and no less important by any means. Sometimes it feels that we get a little bit pushed aside for some other issues. So it is much appreciated that this is coming to the forefront for this panel.
Yes, thank you for having us, and
Right.
thank you for organizing this. It was wonderful. Thank you.
It was very good.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you. I'm glad that you all enjoyed yourselves. And, you know, we will be, you know, DuPage Dems, we will be doing more panels in the future, you know, whether it's regarding Jewish heritage or whatnot, but we will be here, and we aren't going away. So thank you all again so much. And congratulations again, Leah, for being on the court. And we will be here with you throughout the process.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, everyone, thank you for joining. Ken, thank you so much for helping put this together as well. And Iwana, you guys have been amazing. And if any of you haven't met these amazing people, you know, we do have a headquarters in Carroll Stream. Come on and say hi. And I just want to thank you all again, and have a wonderful, oh my gosh, I almost forgot the day, Tuesday evening.